Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Rabin. Our guest today is Lynn Yap. She's the founder of Activate Network, whose mission is to increase the participation of women in the fields of technology and entrepreneurship. She started her career as a corporate attorney and then followed a traditional business path. She got an MBA from the prestigious Wharton School. She worked in investment banking, and I think we'll hear elements maybe of that in her stories. So before I tell you a little more about Lynn, let me just first say thank you for being here, Lynn. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, you're very welcome. And Lynn has a book titled The Altruistic Capitalist: How to Lead for Purpose and Profit. So Lynn's career led her to research more about using businesses as a force for good. She's had conversations with leaders at for-profit corporations, as well as entrepreneurs, investors, and from her own work. So we'll talk about Activate Network and her book. What other, maybe this is a fun fact, this is an impressive fact. Lynn is currently learning her 8th language, Catalan.
Yes,
Am I even saying the name of the language properly? Catalan.
yes, that's correct. Yeah,
So,
I speak 8 languages in varying levels. Let's put it that way.
that's very impressive. I make enough mistakes with English. I would only be making mistakes in other in other languages, which I try. But Lynn, thank you again for being here. As we always do, we ask guests to kind of take a look back and reflect. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
So my favorite mistake, or what I like to see as a moment of growth, or an opportunity for growth, happened in May of 2012. At that time, I was working in investment banking, and I was working on the IPO for Facebook. Now, at that point in time, this was just after the financial crisis. A lot of the tech startups were going public, and we had been, the team that I was in, we had been courting Facebook for a long time, in order to participate, to be on the front cover of the S1, bragging rights, prestigious deal. So a lot of us wanted to be on that deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened at that time, May 2012, my grandmother was also got quite ill, and the doctors didn't think that she would make it. I live in New York. My grandmother lived in Malaysia, where I grew up, in Kuala Lumpur, and I hadn't been back to see her. Work being the way it is in investment banking, when you're working 80 to 100 hours a week, it's really quite hard to take time off, and especially to go all the way back to visit family. So what happened was I went to the team lead and said, look, this is the situation with my grandmother is quite ill, and I really like to go home and say goodbye to her. Unfortunately, the answer that came back was a very quick reply of no. And that was more or less the end of the discussion. There wasn't anything more on that. I was quite disappointed and also very conflicted at that point. Of course, I'm really proud of the work that I do and want to deliver the best quality and up to the best standards. But also my family is very important to me. So I was, of course, that torn between duty to work and duty to my family. And ultimately, I chose to stay in New York and to carry on with the deal. I had been the person behind it for a long time, so I knew the ins and outs of what needed to be done. So then Facebook went on the road show. They went public, and that was that. My grandmother also passed away at that same time, and I didn't have the opportunity to go home and say goodbye and to support my mother at that point in time. So I felt very guilty. I felt a little bit disappointed in myself, maybe even angry with myself for having made that decision, for not perhaps standing up to my values. I couldn't talk about it for a while, but at a certain point in time, learning from the mistake, reflecting on it, and I guess understanding that, moving forward, I didn't want to sacrifice my values. And for me, it's important to value people. People, business leaders say people are our greatest asset, but when it came down to it, that wasn't what I had experienced in this particular in this particular example, in this particular situation. So I started reflecting. I started also looking to see what I could do from a work perspective that gave me meaning, that gave me purpose, that really valued people and respected people for who they are and what value they brought to business. And so I left investment banking and I started to look for work that allowed me to make a positive impact on people and the planet. That has led me to work with companies such as the Estee Lauder company as well as Adidas, where I then work on innovation projects that allowed the brands to increase brand awareness as well as create a positive impact on communities and the environment. And which then eventually brought me down to, going down and wanting to be more aligned with my own values, starting my own organization, which is Activate Network, where I create positive business values for the companies that I collaborate with, as well as the communities that are involved in the projects that are aligned with the things that I'm passionate about, which is then education and leadership of women in our communities.
So, yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, I realize that that's maybe not pleasant to talk about or to share, and I can see where that would lead you to rethink things and get on a different path. And so we'll talk about Activate Network and the book and those values. But a couple follow-up questions on the story that you told. Like how dire, just for context, how dire would the consequences have been if you said, you know what, I have to go to Malaysia? Would you have lost your job? Would you have just been removed from the deal in a way that would have damaged your career?
I suspect that, well, at the most extreme end, I could have lost my job. At a milder sense, I might have been flagged as someone who was less committed to work and maybe not involved in as many deals or even had bonus. Well, in the short term, my bonus would have been at risk. So those are the potential. Those were the potential consequences that I had in my head when I made that decision. This was also earlier on in my career. Was it almost 10 years now? Where I guess with hindsight, if you now it's like, well, it's just one deal, and it's at the end of the day, it's work.
Yeah, but like you said, you take pride in that work. There was the prestige, and I'm sure it was exciting to be part of that. But I mean, I don't know really anything about investment banking. I mean, you were part of, I'm sure, for something like this, a large team. And like, no offense to you, had you gone to Malaysia, the team would have continued, the deal would have come to fruition, right?
This was also just after the financial crisis, so it was quite a lean team. It was me, and then there was the lead of the team. We could have, of course, talk about different alternatives. I could have passed it on to someone from a different industry focus, because I was focused on tech. We were focused on tech. We could have done that, and I could have handed off to a different associate or someone more junior that could have supported the team lead. But there was no discussion about that, and even after the deal ended, there wasn't any follow-up questions. So, how is your grandmother? How are things going? So that was that was a little bit disappointing. Yeah.
So then you said you left banking. How much longer was it before you then left?
It was a few months after. It was quite hard for me to stay focused and to stay engaged in the work that I did after that. I'm very grateful for the time that I had in investment banking. You learn a lot about business, how to run businesses well. But I also saw the side of where if you're overly focused on just the bottom line or growing top line profits, how it can lead to negative impacts of the team.
Yeah, sure. And it's just one other question, and the spirit of the podcast here is not beating people up verbally for their mistakes. You made your choice, and I understand that was a really difficult decision, and it's a shame that you were put in that position. Is, I think, how I would view that and frame that. But at the same time, I've got my favorite mistake coffee mug here, and imprinted on the other side are some things that I remind myself of, and we sometimes talk about here on the show. Be kind to yourself. Nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. The important thing is continuing to learn from our mistakes. So, the final follow-up, question there, Lynn, for you, Lynn, like, were you able to be kind to yourself? I know you felt bad. You said you felt guilty. Like, were you able to show yourself some grace? Did that just take time?
Yes, I really like that one. Be kind to yourself. It's something that I've learned over the years. And indeed, be kind to yourself is one of the most important things in order to grow, in order to learn from our mistakes, to look back and say, hey, that was okay. The important thing is take it as a data point and use it to move forward. An important thing is moving forward. So yes, over time, I've been able to, learn to go easy on myself. It's okay to take a bit more risk.
Right.
Because it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fall, as long as I saw, oh, okay, that's what happened. That's why I fell, and to have the courage to stand up again, and to take the next step. Yeah.
And those next steps, including starting Activate Network and writing, and that puts yourself in a position where you could make different decisions or balance work and life or whatever comes up if you need to step back and move away. I imagine you're a good boss to yourself and to others.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, indeed, I am. I've been better able to balance my own time and to focus on things that really matter to me. But I didn't decide. I decided to start Activate Network, and the book project was something that came up as a result of COVID. But I started those projects because I wanted to create impact, and I'm someone who is also quite curious and wanting to learn, wanting to put myself out of my comfort zone in order to grow. And so, with being kinder in learning to be kinder to myself as well, it was okay to start something, and if it doesn't work out, then okay, now I know, at least I tried it. At least I tried starting my own organization to see where it led to. And similarly with a book, that has been quite a learning curve. I didn't expect the amount of work and the amount of time that it would take, but it has been so rewarding. Yeah. And every time I put a new piece of writing out to the public, it's letting myself be naked and be judged, and it's okay. I'm also kind to myself. It's like, that's okay if that wasn't perfect. The important thing is to understand the process of creation, of learning from others, and then sharing that piece of knowledge and wisdom with the rest of the world. So that's what I've taken from the whole writing journey.
So I am tempted by one more follow-up question, just based off your bio. And again, I do have questions. I want to learn more about Activate Network in the book. But from your bio, it says you started as a corporate attorney and then you went to Wall Street. I mean, are you still? Was that an intentional career change where you thought, well, working as a corporate attorney or working full-time in law was? I don't know if mistake is too strong of a word, but I'll use the word. And if you disagree, I'd be curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, again, I will say it wasn't a mistake, because I don't regret not. I don't regret going into law school. It was something that I was encouraged to go into, to explore as a career, corporate law. I was very strong in mathematics and physics, so I love everything that's quantitative. But I was encouraged to go and be a corporate lawyer, because that's a nice, stable career to have.
Yeah.
And when I was when I was a corporate attorney, I believe I did quite well. I was given my own projects to manage. I started drafting my own contracts at at a junior level, which is quite unusual.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, because I was working in corporate law, I was also exposed to this group of people called the investment bankers,
Yeah.
and they seemed to be, doing all this cool financial stuff, dealing with numbers. And I thought, maybe I'll try that. It wasn't a career opportunity that I was exposed to when I was growing up or when I was in
Mm-hmm.
college,
Yeah.
and so I again put myself out there and hustled for a role in investment banking and kind of took it from there.
Yeah. So again, our guest today is Lynn Yap. She's on, by my count, her third career, which is, that's how these things go. So, tell us more, in this third phase of your career, Activate Network. Looking at the website, looks like there's a lot of interactive programs, and you can kind of explain, the programs are targeted toward young women. Tell us more about that.
Yes, thank you very much. So these programs are actually multi-generational leadership programs. It's intended to, again, increase the participation of women in senior leadership, in technology, in entrepreneurship. It's basically to empower women to achieve their fullest potential. And what happens is I partner with companies who then set up a business problem that they want to solve. So I'll give the recent example. The most recent cohort that graduated, a collaboration with Pearson Education. They wanted to find out what would a qualification in sustainability look like, because they what they do is they produce qualification products. What does a qualification in sustainability look like? What are the different careers in sustainability that students will be interested in? Students entering college and graduating from college, what type of careers are those? And then finally, what is the new method of delivery that will engage the students in this new qualification? So that was the business problem. And the participants of the program are women employees, whether it's a junior level all the way to up a senior level, women employees from Pearson, and then there are students from the ages of 14 to 15 who are participating in the program. And together they work to solve this business problem. So the students go and do research, do interviews. The women talk to the students directly, so they have direct access to the target market of Pearson. So there's clear business value that's delivered. The women, and this is based on an internal impact assessment report that Pearson did, they found that the women who participate in the program, they got to know women who worked in different functions, because one is a virtual program. So there were women from the US as well as the UK that participated. They were able to meet people from new teams. They were able to learn from people with different perspectives and different working cultures. Because what happens is I also pair up the women I pair the women up with someone else who has a different way of working and the way of seeing things, just based on interviews that I do with them beforehand. And the same with the girls. There's a positive impact on the community, because the girls typically come from disadvantaged families, and they get to see different career opportunities. So they're exposed to careers in digital and technology, and they have these role models to look up to. There are these women who have achieved success in their careers, and they also have, other outside interests, personal interests, family that they are involved in. So all of this then together delivers business value to Pearson, business value to Pearson. There was value to the employees. So the women were more engaged at work because they felt that they were doing meaningful work. And then finally, on the community itself, the students, the female students, they were very excited to, understand what it's like to work for a company, know the different careers within Pearson. And of course, this is their potential pipeline, because at the end of the program, we had some of the girls come up and say, oh, do you have internships? How can I, I mean, they're still a bit too early to be part of an internship, but, they were so excited to get to know these women, and they wanted them to be part of the company in the future.
And Pearson is the business school in London, is that?
Pearson Education is, yes, It is based in the UK. Yeah, okay. But it's a global education. company.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so people who might want to get their daughter involved in the program, or if they're a young professional themselves, I mean, geographically, women can participate in this program regardless of where they live. Is that right?
Yeah, this is 100% virtual since COVID, and because COVID, I would say actually COVID has helped because this has enhanced the program more than what it used to be when it was when it was a hybrid between virtual and in person. Now, because it's 100% virtual, the girls are also exposed to mentors from different parts of the world. We have had mentors from South Africa, for instance, and they get very excited because it's something, it's a culture that they're not necessarily don't necessarily interact with usually.
And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this gap, this clearly measurable gap. As one of my previous guests, Tom Peters, the legendary business author and consultant, Tom Peters spends a lot of time, and I think rightfully so, yelling and screaming, I mean, like in a constructive way, making the point that we need more women on corporate boards. There aren't enough women as CEOs. Is that part of the vision of what a program like Activate Network is working toward, Lynn?
Indeed, the vision is to have more women's voices heard at the table. So whether it's corporate boards, whether it's senior leadership, whether it's creating new products, I think it's important to have diversity and inclusion, not just now. There are diversity quotas, for instance, that X%, let's call it 30% of women in boards or at senior leadership. But I think what's more important is to make the women feel included in the conversation, to have the courage and the self-confidence to actually do that. And in this program, we've also basically encouraged the female students and the women to speak up. It's a safe space. There is a sense of sisterhood, and it was intentionally made 100% female for that reason, to give that safe space in order to speak up.
Well, that's great. I'm sure an initiative like this, along with others, will help close that gap. So you talked about the gap in sort of the culture and the treatment that you were receiving in your previous job, like you said, not even being asked about your grandmother. And when you think about different goals and stakeholders to a business, profit clearly is important. I say that with somebody with an MBA. I think profit is more often than not a positive driving force in the pursuit of that. But at the same time, when that's the only driving force, then I think we get into problems. And the Business Roundtable group of CEOs put out a statement saying we've got to do more than just focus on shareholders. We've got to look at stakeholders. I'm curious, what was your reaction to that, or in general? This seems to tie into your book, The Altruistic Capitalist, really well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think stakeholder capitalism, where all the interests of stakeholders are balanced, including being financially disciplined. That's very important. A recent development is that last year, just about a year ago, the World Economic Forum then came up with 21 core stakeholder capitalism metrics that focus on people, governance, the planet, prosperity in the sense of how much investment does a company make in the local communities in which they operate in, how much taxes they pay in the local communities. I think this is an even more exciting development where these metrics, they're proposing to make these metrics mandatory reporting. So in addition to the financial reporting that we see right now, with the profit and loss, balance sheet, cash flow, these metrics will also become mandatory. And that means that there's more transparency. We are able to look across companies and compare them and analyze them consistently. It also, what you measure is where you focus your work on. And so that will also get people to start thinking about, okay, what about access to access to clean water? What about the gender pay gap? What about our diversity demographics? How how are we taking care of the of our communities? What are we doing for the planet? What's our carbon footprint? I think all of these are very important to focus companies in the future on the topics that affect all of us. And I think those companies that do not report on these metrics or are not taking steps to prepare their data and their systems for these metrics will be left behind.
Well, I think that could happen. That leaving behind could be a matter of consumers making decisions based on companies they deem to be socially responsible, and or some investors are actually really starting to push for this, right?
Indeed, yeah. Assets under management in the last year during COVID just skyrocketed. So many investors started to look more into transferring their assets, they're transferring their investments into more sustainable assets. So companies that are focused on the environment, on sustainability for the communities. That is also, I think, putting pressure on companies to start looking at how different business activities are done. It's not just a question of, well, we're going to put a fancy campaign out, we're going to put a fancy message out, but you don't do the work. You have to walk the talk. There's a lot of transparency. People are going into the details and trying to find out, well, what is it that you really do? And it has to be consistent. It's okay if there is a gap in your sustainability strategy or in the things that you do, but there is a plan then to address that gap. I think people respect that, we are still learning and there's still a long ways to go in terms of being carbon neutral. But if we address that gap and say, all right, this is the plan to get to this stage, I think consumers respect that and will reward you for it.
Yeah. So when you look at the book, and again, the title is The Altruistic Capitalist. In the book, you talk about the altruistic capitalist mindset or mindsets. You sketch this out in much more detail in the book, and there are the stories and the interviews. But can you kind of summarize what those mindsets are, what you discovered through your interviews?
Sure, thank you. So I interviewed 50 odd corporate executives, social entrepreneurs, nonprofits, investors, organizations that are really interested in creating a positive impact in the environment and as well as people. And what I found consistent across these interviews were three mindsets or leadership traits, that of mindfulness, curiosity, and grit. And grit, and I mean it in the form of scaling impacts through collaboration. I found that very consistent, and these three were present in a lot of the conversations that I had with for the book.
And the book is the book has been available since April 2021. It's a really important topic, like you said, focusing not just on profit but on people and the planet. And there are other P's or other there are other core metrics. But I think as those categories go, trying to find a balance between focusing on profit, people, planet. Really important, really inspiring. So I know those stories will be helpful. At the beginning of the book, I only got so far into the book, I will admit, Lynn, but the story that you told here today on the podcast about that time in investment banking and not being able to go visit your grandmother, that story does help tee up the book. So I had a pretty strong inkling that would be the story we'd hear about today. So again, our guest has been Lynn Yap. You can find the book's website at altruisticcapitalist.com. I had to focus really hard to try to not stumble over that. My mistakes with the English language, altruisticcapitalist.com. Maybe one other question here, front and center on the website, big, huge picture of an old typewriter. Are you sort of like Tom Hanks? Are you a typewriter buff or you just like the image?
I just like the image. I believe I'm slightly old school like that, but I work on a laptop. I also journal. That's part of my mindfulness practice. I also journal, so I'm a bit old school like that. I like writing too. But most of the writing I do for publishing is done on my laptop.
Okay. And then there are, I don't think I would buy one of these, but there are external keyboards that look very much like an old retro typewriter with the similar kind of key action.
Oh, I have to look that up. I didn't know that those existed.
Yep. So you maybe can give that a try, or it's a mistake and hopefully there's a refund policy.
Yeah, indeed.
But Lynn, it's been really nice to meet you through this. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Congratulations on the launch of the book. I hope people check it out, The Altruistic Capitalist by Lynn Yap. I'm glad to hear your story and your reflections. And I think something that gets categorized as a favorite mistake is something that's hard that's hard to go through, but then it sounds like it certainly helped push you in a different direction, and you seem very happy with that. So I'm glad to hear it. Thanks again, Lynn.
Thank you so much for having me.